Sinfonia number 12, and it's a fabulous piece. This is later, out of 15 sinfonias, this is towards the end, and how Bach constructed these from number 1 through 15. They get more complex as they get farther along. This one is built on scales and broken chords and a fugue. So it has a whole lot. I'd like to start with the subject that starts in the soprano in the key of A. And we're starting right on the A. Climbing up the scale and then a tail at the end. But that added D sharp tells us we're immediately going to another key. We're going to A major, which is the dominant. And at that point, our second voice, the second subject, which is really called an answer because it's on the dominant, comes in the left hand. It's the tenor. And then he takes the D natural to tell you, okay guys, now we're back to A, and the bass comes in on the tonic. And a little bit later, the soprano comes in. It's a sneak entrance way up here. You're not expecting it. And it holds for a bit. So, taking my protractor here, the way I laid out this chart, and I did this specifically to show the 4 voice entries. Our first system is the soprano on the tonic, A major. The next system is the tenor entry on the dominant. Then the bass entry on the tonic again, A. And then the dominant entry, soprano, down here. So here are your 4 entries. Subject, answer, subject, answer. Nice and clean and easy to follow as far as subjects go. Now it gets a little more complicated because we have the 3 parts. I would like to take the soprano alone and show you how inventive this is. Just listen to now extended scale. Delightful. It's so joyful. That dotted rhythm at the end there coming down the... That gives character to it. And the character of this piece is happy, joyful, and has vitality. That's why I picked it, because it lifted my spirits. Now that line right there, measure 5, the soprano gets to do a little leapfrog thing with the tenor, or alto if it's a high enough. I'm calling tenor and alto interchangeable in this piece because we only have 3 voices. Listen to this wonderful leapfrog. Of course, that has to be played all with the right hand. Slowly. Tricky. So the opening now we know we have our 4 voices. He's adding another element here just to play around with the scale again of A major. If you were exploring, how about this? Transposed. And then starting on our last line here, he's going to use what's called augmentation. That dotted 1, 2, 3, 4 becomes, in the tenor, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's twice as slow. That's augmentation. That's one of the principles that they used in this time period. So I'm going to put the hands together now at the beginning of your page 1. Isn't that beautiful? How he chooses to go in contrary motion with the tail of our subject. Based on that scale. Going on. Now that same tail becomes the developmental material for our first sequence. And in the bass here, it sounds like this. I'll actually proceed with our bass entry in measure 5. Here's the subject. Now the soprano did, so it's an identical repetition of the opening soprano line. However, he does and steps down. Taken the tail of our subject and used it as developmental material in the form of a sequence. Now I want to show you with your 3-page chart here how that, what we're working on right now with this sequence built on the tail that I just played for you, comes 3 times in the piece. Sequence 1 here, sequence 2 over here on page 2, and on page 3 for the wrap-up, and it is identical material, just in different keys and with the parts sometimes inverted. The other thing that I'll show you, there are 2 more sequences. I call them A and B, and that is developed on the same idea of the leapfrog material we had right over here between the soprano and the tenor. So when we get over to this section, you'll be able to compare that type of sequence and how it's constructed all around this element. I'm making a lot of focus today on our page 1 because that is where all this material is stated and then further developed with pages 2 and 3. This, I will tell you right now, is a very difficult piece. I think this is harder than the partitas, and it's right up there with some of the complicated fugues of the well-tempered clavier. This is really advanced music. I've been working on this piece for 3 years and still finding more and more things in it. Going with hands together at the bottom of our page 1, slowly. Tail there leads us to our new key. It's actually very briefly in C-sharp major. We're not going to stay there at all. Let me just play this starting at the top of 2 in another sequence, so it's going to be moving. C-sharp is going to stay in the bass. I'm going to show you the 2 parts, the soprano and the tenor on the upper, redistributed between the right and the left. You're going to play it all with the right hand, but this way you can really hear the voice dialogue. Listen to this, it's so beautiful. It's all built on the nucleus of our opening. The rhythm of the opening motive. Answer. Isn't that beautiful? Now it goes on the next line with in parallel thirds and then splits. sharp minor. And that's the relative minor of our opening key. And what does he do? He gives us our subject again, this time in the relative minor. Here is our theme, now in the relative minor. The same subject. Before we go on with that, I wanted to show you your version when you get your chart is completely clean and pristine. Here is page 1. Once again with the 4 entries. Like that. I just think it's so beautiful. You can get it at my website, sallychristianmusic.com. It will make your study on this so much easier, and you can start practicing any one of these out of order and know exactly where the subjects and the answers come and the keys they come in without having to hunt for it in the music, which is a great feature. I'm going to back up for a bit here at the beginning of measure 13. I want to show you how this progresses so beautifully. We know we're coming to F sharp minor, but how does it get there? He precedes with the C sharp, which is the dominant of our new key. So here it is as a pedal point in the bass. Here's another leapfrog. Okay, let's do this whole line again. Up to tempo. We're starting measure 13. Sequence 2. Same material as we had at the bottom of page 1. This time climbing up to E. And this is the pinnacle of the piece, my favorite part of the piece, how he uses the other 2 voices. This is really tricky, and again with redistribution, starting here just before measure 17, with the soprano and the tenor. Just a marvelous way of getting up. There's this 10th here. So as written, second sequence. Another duet, this time in 6/6. Nearly as long as I would have liked with the pedal point in the bass way up high. We're pretty high up in the register of the keyboard here. Another one of those beautiful winding scales, again out of the dominant E major into the tonic of A. What a gorgeous line. How stunning is that? Exactly referenced from our page 1 again. So listen to this line. Soprano. Natural. Ah, what is that? What's the G natural doing? You got it. Setting up another dominant to a 3rd key area, D major. So starting at the beginning of our page 3, we have the sequence B. Remember, A and B sequences are at the top of page 2 and 3. Easy to follow, easy to compare back and forth. It's the same material. Let's start here at measure 21, page 3, D major. Very beautiful. Now, I'll just tell you something I found very interesting on this. The sequence here on the top of page 2 was 3.5 measures long. Taking the left hand alone, it starts with a partial measure, a half measure. That's the 3rd beat. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. measure 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So they are truly 3.5 measures in length, each of these top sequences. The voices that go above, the first time we had this, thirds and seconds. And listen to the dialogue, it's very important to track the two, dynamically different. You see, this time I played it with the soprano louder and the alto or tenor softer. You can actually reverse that too. And that would sound like this. Artistry and the decisions that you get to continually make and continually change to make this thing alive and compelling and interesting and different. We're not locked into any one way of ever doing anything, especially in Bach. And my touch too, I'll tell you, sometimes I feel like playing it really articulated and kind of semi-staccato. And sometimes I feel like a more legato. Both valid. You get to choose. Going on to sequence B at the top of 3, same idea. This time listen to these intervals in 6ths and 7ths. How different it sounds with this open 7th. Moment there of expansiveness and right back to the tonic and the subject in the bass at measure 24. And this is a pretty fabulous thing. Let me play this as written. And right away we get in mid measure another subject entry in the soprano on the tonic. Now this is a real tricky part in the piece. I had to work a long time on this measure 24 system. Starting with our subject in the bass, A major. You have to right away, again, in the tonic, in the soprano answering. Now what goes over that soprano entry in the bass is really completely unexpected. He does this. That's a reference to F sharp minor. And when you put those two together, it doesn't sound like A major anymore. Listen. And to further complicate the issue here, with our tenor line or our alto line, I'm going to play that by itself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4. Now that's really complicated. I'm going to count this out loud. This again is that scale melody we first had. And he does 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. That is really complicated. And that's your middle part. So that brings me to one more suggestion, which I think is really valid. Play each one of these voices completely through by itself, so you can really find that hidden beauty of each separate line. That's a lot of what Bach was aiming for here, is having standalone parts. They're called obbligato, and that means they're obligated. They are non-negotiable. You must have them, and they stand alone as valid melodies, all three of them. And when you put this beautiful trio together, you have this mosaic of exquisite beauty. So let's now put slowly hands together, measure 24, because this is our wrap-up. We're almost through with the piece at this point. tempo. Coming to an end. What's so beautiful about that final sequence that he chose to end the piece on, he has done an inversion of parts. Our first sequence 1 had the bass with this third motive of the scale. Second time, still in the bass. But our final time is in the soprano. So for the first time, the soprano gets this beautiful motive 3 with a scale tail. Straight A major. Now the left hand, the bass. Now for the only time in the piece we get the leapfrog idea between the bass and the tenor. So the bass actually has that scale melody that we had in augmentation. So it's half the tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The tenor gets the little zigzag leapfrog thing. So put those together. And all together. Coming to an end. Such a beautiful piece. So that concludes the visit we had today on this beautiful Sinfonia in A major. I wish you well with your practice on it, and just remember that the joy is really in the journey. And when you practice and put one little thing into your fingers or into your ears or your memory, you can consider it a victory. I tell myself when I go to sleep at night, this was a day well lived. And make every day a day well lived, and every practice day a day of well lived practice. Happy practicing, and thank you.